Hey everyone, if you're anything like me, there might be some days where you just feel like you're working, 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 but at the end of the day, you felt you didn't do anything. Could that be a problem of work ethic? Well, maybe, but maybe it's a problem of clarity. Well, I got good news for you because today I have David Prosper on today, who is the clarity guy, self-proclaimed, but the clarity guy nonetheless. So, David, welcome to the Self Leadership Lab. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll get this conversation started about this topic of clarity.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby, for the introduction. And yes, I am the clarity guy. And I've been obsessed with what makes people go from confusion to clarity, from insecurity to confidence over the last 10 years. So this obsession led to understanding the gap, and the gap is clarity. So I've written books, or I've written a book on finding clarity, and I'm on this journey of helping 1 billion people live life by design and moving from chaos to clarity.
Man, I love it. So, clarity is a word that gets thrown about a lot these days. You pick up self-help books, you listen to coaches, motivational speakers, it's clarity, clarity, clarity. But for this conversation, can you just simply define what clarity is to you, and then we'll just see where it takes us?
Let's keep it super simple. First principle systems. Clarity is the next right step. And if we can simplify, what's the next right step? One of my favorite speakers, Dr. Martin Luther King, said, faith is taking the first step, even though you don't see the staircase. So he's been talking about it since then. But we were so bogged by having these we need to have these big words to understand it, but it's literally the next right step. And then the next right step leads to the next right step, and it becomes a compound of things. And we actually start living by design.
No, I like that. And, going to the old phrase, a journey of 1,000 leagues begin with the first step, right? And that's essentially what you're saying there is like, you got to do it. So a lot of people seem to be waiting for clarity. Are you suggesting that taking the first step probably is the best solution and clarity will come? Or where do you fall in that way of thinking?
Here's something interesting, Bobby. I think we misconstrue waiting for clarity. I believe a lot of people are waiting for the outcome or the
Mm,
result, but clarity is understanding. Like, for example, I live in Utah, you live in Virginia. If I'm looking for clarity to get to Virginia, I'm not focusing on Virginia roadmaps or their roads. I'm focusing on Utah roads. So I have to understand what's my next right step to leave Utah to go to Wyoming, and what's my path to getting to Virginia. So a lot of people mistake and say, "Oh, I'm waiting for clarity." If we're honest, we're waiting for the outcome versus waiting. What do you need to do next? And when we break it down that simple, most people know, oh, if I'm looking to start a business, what is the next thing I need to do? I probably need to file a EIN, or I probably need to build a website. So it's literally that simple. And once we start doing that next right step, we're like, oh, since I built a website, what else do I need to do? I need to have my products on there. So it's that simple. So I just wanted to like break the myth of that.
no, no, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that because if you're waiting for the result, you're never going to get there because, instant success takes a long time and you're going to do it. And that doesn't mean if you take a step, like let's use your same analogy. Let's say you're leaving Utah to come to Virginia and let's say you go the wrong way. Well, had you not ever started, you'd never know, right? So I'm under the belief that you can define your clarity and gain more clarity day in and day out as long as you're moving and taking action and doing something versus just sitting around being fearful or anxious about the end result, as you say it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. You said you can define your clarity, and that's the whole premise of living by design. It's it's like when I was cleaning my room, and like I'm cleaning everything, and what I've noticed is, oh, I was missing that. And when I realized I was missing, I was like, hold on, I need that. And that's the same thing with clarity. Like once we start clearing the clutter, then we start finding what actually means something to us, or we realize what don't mean something to us. And it's that premise of, hold on, I'm designing it by doing this process. I remember in college, one of my teammates, my freshman year, said, marry the process and the outcome's inevitable. And when he said that, I was 17. I was like, what does this mean? But now, as a 34-year-old, I'm like, oh, that's clarity. Marry the process and the outcome's inevitable. if I am doing the systems, the habits, the behaviors, and using the tools and the frameworks, then the outcome of whatever I aspire to becomes inevitable versus focusing on the result itself and being disappointed by how the journey, in your analogy, if I take a wrong turn, I can readjust to get back on track.
Yeah, no, I like that whole idea of enjoy the process and not the result. And that's another thing that gets bantered about a lot. And I think it takes action in order to start enjoying the process because, like you said, you're taking these baby steps, you're doing these little small steps on your path. You do gain confidence, you gain clarity, you gain, I guess, just like a feeling that you can do something. And I think the more you take these small steps, the less you think about Virginia. And now you're going to be able to enjoy Utah. You're lucky. You said you're 34 to find this at 34. Wow. Good on you, man, because I'm 47 and it probably took me 46 years to start enjoying the process. So talk a little bit about that more. I mean, like, how did you go from being a 17-year-old kid hearing this for the first time to actually enjoying the process?
Life gives us a series of called trauma. And what I realize with trauma is there are so many things out of our control. So when I started noticing, okay, what's in my control? Like as a collegiate athlete, two sport athlete, our aspiration was always championships. We can't get that hardware just by saying, okay, I want that hardware. The hardware is built in watching film, going to practice for 3 hours, lifting weights, eating right, studying, and then understanding the game plan and being prepared. So at 17, being introduced like the collegiate athletic world, I'm like, okay, hold on. If I just focus on my controllables, knowing my playbook, knowing the calls, being physically ready, being sharp, being having my sleep in order and my nutrition, then when it comes for game time, all I got to do is perform and it becomes muscle memory. So just the practice of that. And then I've always been analytical. And I'm like, okay, so if that works here, can I apply that same thing here? Can I apply that same thing here? So I'm like, hold on. So if that works for athletes at a high level, how can that work for entrepreneurs? How can that work for mom and dads? How can that work for business leaders and executives or even frontline workers? I'm like, these are all transferable skills of focusing on the habits, the process, and then that allows us to be more present versus we're thinking about tomorrow, and we're never here where our feet are planted.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And another saying, I'm quoting a lot of people today, not giving anyone credit for it, but how you do one thing is how you do everything. And
Mhm.
I think that when you're getting your actions together and your movement forward, you're going to see that because when you start a journey you have an ideal in mind, but typically when we reach the ideal, either it's shifted or we found more along the way. But if we start doing something every day, it's gonna permeate everything. Like, let's say you just want to work on your physical fitness. Well, the discipline and the time involved in the process of doing that is going to trickle into your academics or into your cooking or into your relationships even. It's really, really cool. And I think that's what's really awesome about clarity. But what about those people out there who say they don't have a vision, they don't have a goal, and they're just spinning? What do you tell them to get them moving? Because we've already demonstrated that you got to start moving because clarity will come. But what about these people who are waiting and like missing out on the opportunities to either enjoy the process or gain clarity for themselves? What would you say to them?
Mm, that's a great question. And this is going to be like countercultural. I don't believe everyone has a vision, but I believe everyone has a purpose. And our purpose is what are we naturally, instinctually good at? What comes naturally to us? Some people it's numbers, some people is artistic expression, some people is the ability to retain things and regurgitate things, some people is data entry, and some people is speaking. So those people who are waiting for either that spark of inspiration, I would first encourage start consuming good things, inspirational things, because the word inspire means to breathe life. So there's some things that have been dormanted inside of us that needs life to be breathed on us. And then the second thing, start putting yourself in communities and spaces where people like yourself, Bobby, who think more expansively versus more narrowly. And with that, it becomes that trickle down effect. Like my grandpa would always say, tell me who your friends are, I'll tell you where your future goes. So if we're looking for that inspiration, like sitting on our butt, like it's not gonna knock on our door like a Jehovah Witness, like, hey, do you want to hear about Jesus Christ? So it's like it's not gonna come that easy. We have to go out and look for it. And once we are in those spaces, the last thing I would say, start exploring what are your gifts? Like what fulfills you through service? And then next thing is like, who am I supposed to serve? And once we figure out what we're gifted at, who we're supposed to serve, then we start living in our purpose. And then eventually we either might get vision or we might be attached or connected to somebody who has vision.
Yeah, no, no, that is absolutely true. Who you hang out with and what you feed yourself, whether it's nutrition or information, really helps you because I'll be honest, man, the world today, it's just serving up fast food junk for your mind. And any thought that comes into your head, the first reaction your friends will probably tell you or you see on the news is you can't. Or hey,
Yep.
what about all these things? Like, you talk about the business, it's like yeah, if you take it one bite of the apple or one bite of the elephant, as they say, at a time, you're going to be able to get there. But if you're starting today with just an idea to think about having a business and all the things that are involved with it really is crazy. So surround yourself. I agree with you wholeheartedly, David, because getting the right people in your corner, like when you played, what sport did you play?
Football and
Okay.
track.
Okay, football and track. Wow, dual sport athlete here today. First
Yeah.
time ever on the self leadership lab. So yeah, there
Let's
you
go.
go. So Jeopardy one day. But no, I mean when you were in the football team, they didn't bring in like badminton coaches or tennis coaches, right? They brought in people who knew the sport of football, and the same is true in life. If you're trying to do something, go find people. And I'll tell you, I hear a lot of times, well, a business owner doesn't want to talk to me. Did you ask them? Because I can tell you what, as a business owner myself, and I think you've got one too, I love it when people come to me and ask for help. And I think most people are like that because we all want to see people succeed. And you know what? You and I've learned some lessons. We can even help you. And a lot of these things that are blocking your clarity, we might be able to lift those obstacles for you. And then you can go and do, like you said, follow your passions or what you're really good at. Because let's be honest, billions of people probably have had businesses over the course of the life of our lives. And it's doable.
Yeah.
So yeah, great concept there. I do, and I'm going to botch it because I don't have it in front of me, but I've been reading your book, Finding Clarity, right? That's the name of Finding Clarity, right? And
Yes.
and you talk about like I think it was four different types of people in the clarity journey. Am
Mhm.
I right on that? Is it four? Maybe
Yeah.
it's five. I don't know. Can you kind of walk us through that? Because I thought that was really powerful the way you broke that down, and I think it can help people kind of understand whether or not they say they have no clarity or they're just beginning the process or whatever, because this cycle that you and please correct what it truly is called. I apologize for botching it up, but please go ahead and share that with us.
Oh, no, not a problem. Thank you for reading it, by the way. And yeah, you're right. It's the clarity cycle. It's not a permanent stage. It's where we're at in the journey. And like you said in earlier, like if I'm going from Utah to Virginia and I take a wrong turn, I at least know that I'm headed in the wrong direction, so I can now pivot. So the first step in the cycle, the first person is a wanderer. This person is constantly feeling that overwhelmed sense of feeling and but knows that there's something not right and they're longing for something, but they're overwhelmed by everything. And traditionally, this person looked like they're in chaos. Everything is urgent. Then along the journey, they are inspired by listening to Self Leadership by Bobby, and they're like, "Oh my goodness! Like this inspired me." And they become a seeker, and the seeker is constantly looking for information, absorbing information, attending the networking places, reading all the self-help books, accumulating these things so they can have a greater understanding and expose themselves to greater education. And then they meet a guide and they're like, huh, So now what do I do with all this information? And this guy says, hey, how about you start implementing these things for your own life? Then they become an architect. And in this stage, as an architect, they're designing their lives, they're designing their communities because we can't control the communities that we come from, but we can control the communities we create. And one of my favorite JFK statements or quotes, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I love to spin it and say, don't ask what your community can do for you, ask what you can do for your community. So, like when we create these spaces as an architect, now we're starting to thrive and flourish in those spaces and places. Then they move into the last stage, which is the flow master. And the flow master is the individual who is grounded and convicted in who they are. They're not moved by the emotions of people. They understand the dynamics of people's projections and reflections, but they know their identity and they're aligned to their creator. And they typically go back and help the wanderer. So anyone can move through these stages and cycles within a day. So you can be a wanderer 1 minute, learning a new project, being overwhelmed. You can be an architect 1 minute. And the goal is to just understand where you're at in the cycle so you can make your next right step.
Mm. Yeah, that was a really powerful way you broke that down. And I think when people, and you should go read this book, but when you read it, you're going to understand this a little more. And what I saw when I was reading it was there are some places in my life I'm a wanderer. There are some places I am an architect. I'd like to think that there's some places I'm the flow master, but again, it's all part of the process. And maybe I am, maybe I'm at coming in and out of them. But that's what's really cool about this. And I think this really sums up the quest for clarity is you're not going to get it all overnight. There are processes, and each one of those has a very valid point. The only problem I would say is that the wanderer, don't spend too much time there because the more you think about something, you start getting fears. You start getting anxiety. You're going to tell your brain, I would do this, but I don't have this. I don't have this. I don't have this. Well, you don't have it now, but you can go get it. And I think that's one thing that blocks a lot of people in their movement. But what of those, I mean, do you see that in the people you coach and the people you talk to? I mean, do you see people in different cycles depending on what it is? Because I think, let me preface that. I know I'm double questioning here, which you're not supposed to do, but I think that you can have clarity in more than one area. It's not just one thing. It could be, you could have clarity in the way you run your business, the clarity of the way you are a husband, a father, whatever. Do you agree with that? Or do you think I'm off base there?
No, 100% I agree. It's not finite, it's infinite. And it's multifaceted and it's multidimensional. So someone can have clarity as a husband, but they lack clarity as a spiritual person, or they can vice versa, has clarity in business and how the business dynamic is worked and struggle in relationship, or they can have both. But the goal is as we pursue clarity, which is the understanding of how things work, why things work, and how we can impact the things that work. Once we do it in one area, like you said earlier, how we do one thing is how we do everything. So it can be applied in another area. And I believe a lot of things are transferable, just like all all wisdom can be applied. We just have to be willing to like tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and that whole process, and once you kind of understand that, I think it gives people the freedom. So if you're on the fence and you're not making the moves, know that you got to start. And I know when we first talked in our pre-interview for this show, I told you, man, I think clarity is overused, and you kind of sold me on clarity because you define it differently than most people because you actually define it. It's most people just say, oh, you got to have clarity. It's like saying vision or goals. Well, what does that mean, right? And I think it's a very valuable tip that I got is like, hey, there is a process. And I thought back on like anything I've accomplished in my life, and all of those things, I went through those cycles. Again, maybe not the flow master, even though I love that. I love that title. It should be like flow master. But the thing is, when I started thinking about it more and contemplating this, I realized that a lot of times I thought I didn't have clarity, but what it really was is I was stuck in one of these cycles and probably unwilling or unable to break out. So for people who are like that, what encouragement would you have? What words of advice to, move through the cycle and, keep that process going, especially when you think you've lost it, because nothing's worse than feeling you lost your purpose or lost your clarity.
Yeah. That's such a good question. I actually had a conversation with my client this morning about it, and she was talking about some of the trauma and how her triggers. And I told her, okay, this is what we're going to work on for the next 6 weeks. We're going to address your state, your story, and your systems. And when we address the state, now we're moving our body because when we physically move, we naturally get those endorphin runs. And when we can move our state and change our emotions, then we have the capacity to address our stories. And our stories, when they're on the auto loop, if they're positive, we're feeling good about ourselves. If our stories are negative, why me? I'm an imposter. Look at me, wham, all that stuff, right? It facilitates a negative emotion, and now we carry all of this weight. And then the last step is the systems. We don't fall to our level of intention, we fall to our level of our systems. So when New Year goals happen, people like New Year, new me, they go right back to their systems. So we're always asking, change your behavior, but our systems is our beliefs. Once our beliefs are changed, then our behavior become the byproduct. And then when we have systems and routines and rhythms that keeps us focused, that keeps us triggered to do the right thing, then everything starts to take a shift. And now when we are met with our old selves or our old patterns and our old beliefs. Now we say, I hold space for that. You've held a space in my life. Now I have new systems, and when we upgrade our systems, then we can change our stories, we can change our states, and ultimately we can find that clarity so that we live in confidence, we live in our true identity, and we live a life by design.
No, yeah, those are all three really good phases or tips to use, and it, it's weird with what changing your state can do for you because I heard it this morning and I'm probably botch it, but they say like 75% of all ideas come from not doing the work that would generate the ideas. So taking a walk or a run or whatever, yoga, whatever your activity is. Why do you think that is? Because I've got a theory, but I want to hear yours first.
Why do I think the state changes?
Yeah, change things, and specifically like through movement or something different than actually doing the work itself.
I don't know. For me, it it's like when I was building my desk that my computer is on right now. Doing something physical momentarily suspends my fixation on whatever I'm trying to solve. And then it allows me to temporarily be distracted, but that distraction creates a form of inspiration. And then as I'm building this desk, I'm like, hold on, I'm working on this software development. What if I do this? So it's just like, it's a temporary suspension. And like when I've been told procrastination is a bad thing, the more I'm learning about it is like, no, there's good forms of procrastination because it removes, it's like when I was at painting with a twist and I'm like painting and my instructor is like, take a step back, take a step back. When we take a step back, we can look at it holistically because when we're fixated on solving something, we're so close to it and it allows us to create some distance. And in distance, create perspective. Perspective allows new paradigms, and paradigms changes our focus.
Yeah, yeah, and I couldn't agree with that more. My thought on that is that doing something different takes your thoughts away from what you're doing. And as we talked about before on even on this podcast, and I talk about it a lot, I find the more you think about something and not do something, then it really like starts instilling these bad behaviors and this self-doubt and this anxiety around whatever you're doing. And so taking a step back or taking a run or just like you said, building a desk, it doesn't have to be something physical, just something different. Maybe even something that you've never done before too might even
Yeah.
help because you've got to focus on that one thing because I think a lot of times clarity is there. We're just focusing in way too intently. And I love what you said about the artist there about stepping back because, in this culture, it's like do more, do more, do more. You got to work harder. You got to outwork everyone in the room. Well, Maybe sometimes you do, but most of the time I find my best idea is the synthesis of my writing. I mean, when you wrote the book, like, did you find there were times that your best ideas came when you were like far away from a pen and paper, do it, or even when you wake up first thing in the morning, it's like, boom, there's these things because your thoughts a lot of times are the biggest detriment to your clarity and the detriment to your progress. So if you're listening today and you're struggling with this, you heard it from the clarity guy, so don't believe me, but step away. And then I want to talk about changing the story because I think they go hand in hand. And again, since we're doing quotes galore today, Henry Ford said, whether you can or you can't, you're right. Well,
Yep.
that's your story, right? If I say I can do something, chances are I can. Maybe not to the level, like you said, the end result level, but over time I will get there. So to talk a little bit more about the value of changing the story and why you think that's so important in the clarity journey.
Yeah, it's the reason why we watch so many inspirational movies like The Underdog, because their story of being met with all of this resistance and the rejection and how they've overcome, and we're attracted to that because something inside of us pulls us. But when we have negative stories, we're looking for it because it's like when I got my Tesla, and now my friends are like, oh, every time I see a Tesla, I think of yours, and I see a white one. It shapes what we're focusing on. Like if I say, look for something brown around you, like the room didn't change, but your focus did. And when we're creating stories of I'm an imposter, I'm not good enough, bad things always happen to me, and those disempowering stories, now when we're listening to people, we're listening for those confirmation versus affirmation and validation, because people don't really look for validation. They look for confirmation of their belief system. But if I believe that I am enough and that I'm created to create, so when I listen to people like, oh, that's a creative idea. What else can I create from that? How can I compound it? And you've done it throughout this conversation. You're a collaborator and you're a cultivator. So if I said something, you're like, I want to jump on that. Here's my thoughts on that. So I sense you're naturally a collaborator versus you're a competitor. Like, oh, let me one up David. Let me sound more sophisticated. So when our stories are questioned and refined and fine-tuned and designed, it will either dictate how we move, how we perceive people, and how we interact with the world. So there's, like you said, you turn on social media and you scroll and you see people on the left, you see people on the right. One person is saying, the world is going away. We have to stand up. The other was like, those people. And it's just like, they're all telling a story, and their stories are shaping how they're perceiving each other.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it goes down to what's your story
Yeah.
because, I can hear two different opinions on anything I'm thinking about, but what am I observing? What am I living? What is my perception and my reality? Because really, going stoic on us here, there's two things we can control, our thoughts and our actions. And if you allow someone else to do your thoughts, and I really like what you said in that about they're looking for affirmation. And another thing too is a lot of times we ourselves are looking for affirmations, and you don't really need that with clarity because if it's your path, just the progress that you're making is going to affirm your story is what it is. Now, sure, that doesn't mean I can't call you up and say, David, I got this thing. I want your opinion on it. That's different than me calling you and having you pump me up. Like, I hate these leading questions that people ask me all the time. Like, they'll say, well, you know how it is. I didn't do this. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course, I don't know how it is. And I certainly don't know how it is for you because I don't allow that in my life. So, this whole affirmation thing, too, I wrote a whole book about, doing the work that matters to you. Don't go after what someone else's did. The more you go to others to affirm what you're doing, the more it becomes their clarity and not your clarity. So
Yeah.
very, very cool. And the third, you said story, state story. What was the third one?
Systems.
Systems. Oh yeah, yeah. Systems are very and when you first introduced it, you said that they're evolving. And
Yeah.
what you start with today is probably going to change hundreds of times, right? You're going to become more efficient, more effective. It's just like phones. We're still not walking around with flip phones in our pockets. Now we got like little mini computers that can, I think now they can have like 2 terabytes of data stored on there. So don't be scared of your systems when you're doing it. Talk a little bit more about the importance of systems though, and in finding clarity and going on this path.
Yeah, I was introduced to it like when the first day I reported for camp, leaving as a high schooler, and I played high school football, and it was fun. High school football is fun when athletes become a collegiate athlete and a professional, and I played overseas. It's no longer fun; it becomes a job because there's a system that you have to buy into. This is how we're run. This is our schedule. Here's our standard. Here's our rules. Here's our non-negotiables. Here's our gray spaces. So when we're developing systems of our personal lives, what are our non-negotiables? What are our standards? One of my favorite books right now is The Science of Scalability, or The Science of Scaling. And it talks about three things: your floor, your focus, and your framework. And oftentimes, like our floor becomes our standard. So if we expect less of ourselves and we expect or we tolerate how people treat us, then our floor is really low. But when we have a high standard for ourselves, it typically raises how people interact with us. So our system is, what are our rhythms that gets us to perform and interact with life at a high level versus what do we need to do, like a checklist? Because for me, exercising is important. It allows me to show up at a high level, but I can't box all the time because I box and I lift weights. But when I'm in Hawaii, there's no gym to box and lift weights. So I'm gonna run on the beach. That's still a form of exercising. So it's just like our rhythms adapt, our routines are straitjackets. Like if I didn't do this, then I won't do this. And we place ourselves in these straitjackets versus what's the rhythm? Oh, I need to move my body. Or I need to eat healthy. I'm not going to eat a home cooked meal, but I can eat a salad out and about. I can drink a smoothie. So it's, what are the things that gets us to perform at a high level, and then understanding how to remove and create boundaries of the things that drains us. And then there's interactions that we're going to have, but can we limit the access and can we create more boundaries and in a space where we can recharge? So having those rhythms keeps us afloat and moving forward, living by design.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I think anytime you do something for money or for someone else who's making money, something that's fun becomes not so fun. And so I'm glad you pointed that out, because a lot of people want to do things based on their passions and what they're very interested in. But sometimes you can just be interested in it too, right? Because crossing that line into a business or working for someone else to do that, I think is also a hindrance. Like I love to bake bread. And people say, oh, you should have a bakery. No, I don't want to ruin the thing of making bread for me. So like, that's probably a system. It's calming. It's something I enjoy to do. But like if I went to a business, that system would have to change dramatically because there's more output, it's the stress of customers, freshness, all that stuff. So I think that's very important. Another thing you said, and I've never heard anyone say it, and I think we should talk about it a little bit, is you said, I'm going to paraphrase, a system for things that don't feed your soul or don't energize you. And, when we talk about systems and practices and habits and all these things, we rarely talk about those things that drain us. Do you teach people to set up systems to, avoid these techniques?
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the things that I love because I grew up in such a toxic culture and it was abusive, it was violent. And I was like, hold on, like these people are gossiping or they're backbiting. Or so I was like, hold on, what could I create? Because I can't get out of this world. Like I'm gonna be in this world. I can't run away from my problems. So what can I create to protect myself so that I have the capacity, the energy for the right things? So I often talk about community connections. So when people are often drained, like I told one of my clients, I was like, you have the worst community if you're constantly discouraged. or constantly experiencing depression that's not clinical. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you don't have a safe space where you can be yourself, then that space is not a space for you to thrive in. So I often talk about who are our connections, who are our community, and then how much boundaries and access they have to us, who brings us energy, who removes energy. And once we can identify that, we're like, hold on, I'm gonna move accordingly. So it's like navigating through life without trying to control anything because now we have those filters up. So yeah, we work on that constantly from the music we listen to, from the food that we eat, just like what drains us, what fulfills us. And like every great athlete, they eat a diet that helps them perform better and they know what actually hurts them. And if we do the same thing in life, um, we start living more fulfilled, more joyful, and it becomes contagious for the people around us.
Yeah, no, I find that really cool, and it took me a while to find it, but I mean, when you ingest good things, as we talked about earlier, good information, good positive, things, you feel better. But when you hear bad news or you're constantly inundated with, like you said, the left versus right, or, all these, everyone seems to want to fight everyone anymore. And I don't really understand why everyone wants to fight because if they just took time out of their day and just relaxed and just said, "Hey, I'm not going to change the way you think. You're not going to change the way I think. Maybe change my perspective or give me information, those sort of things." But yeah, it's just we're so quick to that. But this whole like food thing too. And I know that we're not talking about nutrition and health and all that thing, but we're both into it. There are certain foods that just make you that can help you get brain fog or not optimize. And I just wish more people would do it. Humans are like I heard the other day, humans are the only mammal in the world. If you eat something that makes you sick, you keep eating it. And it's like
Uh,
the pleasure of the taste versus the pleasure of your performance or your health or the way, I mean, I'm not talking health like sickness and all that. I'm saying your mental health and the way you carry about the day, your energy and all that sort of thing. But that's very interesting. So like, a system's in place. A lot of people wear things. I wear one of these Aura rings. Not promoted, but they're not promoters of the show, but I promote them because I like it. But it's really cool because they have this thing in there. It's called like a stress thing, and it's stress meter. And, typical things like if you do a workout, you may see a little stress. That's normal. But it's amazing how, like, I'll eat a meal and then I'll look at my data and it's like a spike right at that meal time. Well, what is that food doing to me? And so think of this as an analogy and a real thing. What is the bad negative things in my life doing to me in a clarity? And I think a lot of times if you get too much of that, you may think you've lost your clarity, you may think you've lost your purpose. Well, no, you've just been dissuaded by everything around you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that a little more if you want to share.
this is awesome. I love it. I went to a BNI group and um, to each their own. Everybody has their thing. When I went there, I felt like a fish out of water because the dynamic of the culture is what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And if we listen authentically and empathetically, it's people asking what you do to place you in a category. What can you do for me? If humans were really honest, they're really saying, what can you do for me? And if their business can't be served by it, they're going to the next person. We lace it as networking. And as I went to this group, I felt drained. I was like, this, am I awkward? Because I like having meaningful conversation, things that make you think, uh, things that make you grow. But when I went attended another networking spaces in the AI space is where tech founders and innovators down in our valley called Silicon Slopes. I'm like, this charges me up. Like, I felt alive in this group. Like, everybody was talking about expansive things. How was the future, the movement of AI? And I'm like, okay, like I'm in my group. But when I was in this other group, this BNI group, it's traditionally like hard jobs, it's trades, it's real estate, all great things. And but it was like very transactional. And people just literally, when I walked in the door, people handed me like a book of business cards. I was like, I haven't even met anybody yet. Like, let's build a relationship. So it's like once we understand, okay, these are the spaces that actually brings me joy, And then this is a space that actually drains me. I'm going to build my ecosystem here versus I'm going to continue to do this. And it really doesn't fulfill me. And there's a lot of people who attend these networking events, and I talk to them, I coach them. They absolutely hate it, but they don't know anything else. So they do the song and dance. And that leads to, like you were saying earlier, we just have this grind culture. Well, this is what everybody else is doing, so I'm just going to continue to do it. And that leads to burnout and exhaustion. And then what happens is professionally on paper, people look good, but personally, their lives are miserable and the people around them are now their punching block or their punching bag. And now their personal lives are impacted while their professional life look good on paper.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you bring that example because about a year ago I really threw myself into a lot of networking events, and every single time I came out of those things drained and just I'll tell you what, man, I was like, I don't want to be a part of this business. But you know what? That's not true. What it is I don't want to be part of that business. It's still the same way. I mean, you look at, it's successful businesses all around and everyone runs it differently. Well, clarity is you get to do what you want to do, and it's your life, your pursuit, your whatever. As long as you're not hurting anyone, you are free to do whatever you want to do. So I don't have a different networking group. Actually, I used to have one that would really charge me up. It was a group of just, we got to know each other, and it was kind of a good relationship. So that one did. But these big ones where you go in a room and there's hundreds of people and you basically got to shout over someone because they put two, it's not for me. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, because I'm sure a lot of people get good deals and advance their careers and their purpose a lot at those events, but it's not for me. So why did I keep putting myself in there? So once I separated myself from that and started doing smaller groups, now I have like a council of 5. And every time I talk to these people, sometimes we talk about business, sometimes we talk about something else. I always leave better than myself. And so without even knowing it, I've kind of put a system like this isn't for me. And so sometimes you don't have to name your systems, just be cognizant enough and be aware that not everything has to be done the same way by everybody. And in fact, if we did that, life would be very boring, right? I mean, you and I could, two different states, two different backgrounds completely. Imagine if we both tried to be like each other. It would just be weird, right? And that's where, you've made me a believer in clarity over the two conversations we've had, because you gave me clarity about clarity, right? Because I saw it as a blocker, and I think that a lot of times, if we're not careful with it, anything can be a blocker, right? Anything positive, if you go too into it or whatever, but thinking through the way things make you feel and taking those first steps. I think we talked about that a lot today, but that is where you find it, but also giving yourself the permission to be yourself too. Do you find that's part of, clarity as well?
Yeah, that it's clarity is again this pursuit, and you said we don't have to name the system, but be cognizant of it. And again, that transferable cognizant of it, be curious about it. So who am I? What am I designed? What are my values? What's my identity? Who am I becoming is something that I work with my clients on, and then myself included. So if I believe that I'm loved, I'm naturally going to be loving. I can be direct, but I'm going to be loving. If I believe I'm generous, I'm naturally going to be giving. So when we understand who we are, then whatever the world tells us, like I had one individual, I created boundaries for her, and she was like, you need to be more kind, and you're not a nice person. No, I was nice enough to tell you, God bless you. This isn't a good fit. I wish you well. There's a lot of things that you need. I was direct in my communication, and she told me I was unkind, but kindness is still telling the truth, with grace and dignity of the person. So one of the things is when we understand who we are, then the world doesn't get to decide who it wants us to be. And
Mm.
I had a conversation with my client yesterday, and I was like, if we're all honest, all humans are trying to play God. Look at it, right? If I believe this way, then you have to believe this way. And if you don't believe this way, then I'm going to judge you, reject you, versus accepting. And once we have clarity of like, this is who I am, And I will now have the ability to accept Bobby for who you are. So it's that acceptance piece of knowing piece. So the greater we understand ourselves and know ourselves, the greater we can understand others and accept others for who they are. So when we're looking at all of this great divide and I hear conversation, the world is so divided. And I was like, well, look at history. The world's been divided since the beginning of time. Um, we just see it and hear it more because we have social media. But it's just like we're focusing always trying to change someone to be us or our identity versus accepting people for who they are. And the greater we know ourselves, the more at peace we can accept others.
Man, that is such a beautiful concept, and so many people need to hear that because, like, I like what you said. If we don't decide who we are, then the world will decide it for us. And I don't think you'll ever find clarity if you let someone else decide who you are and what you need to be. And this whole discord and the problems in the society, I just want to encourage everyone, look around you. Is your life like that? Or is someone telling you that this is what it is? If someone's telling me something that I don't see with my own two eyes and I experience, like, I'm sure that people all around me think differently than me, act differently than me. There's a lot of differences, but you know what? We never talk about them. We always talk about something positive or at least something that's not confrontational. And I do hear people, they're like, well, this. And I'm like, well, did you see that? Do you observe that? What impact did that have on your life? And I think if you break it down like that, and that's where clarity comes in, because then you're able to separate the chaff and you can say, okay, well, this is what I want to be thinking about. This is what I observe to be true. That doesn't mean it's, you're 100% true all the time, but you know what? Ignorance is bliss a lot of times. So why don't we choose ignorance of all this discord and hate in the world? Because, beautiful people, look at us, two people that don't know each other. I mean, I'm sure we find, if we looked hard enough, we find a lot of things we disagree on, but why? Because we agree on so much, and we've learned, or I've learned so much from you today that it's like blowing my mind, because you kind of helped me do a 180. And see, that's another thing too about clarity. You don't always know what's right. You can think about
Mm-hmm.
things and change your opinion all the time. And that's what I've been seeing in my journey, is the way I look at something today is vastly different than it was 5 years ago. That doesn't mean it's either one was right or wrong. It just
Yeah.
means it's different. And that's why I think what you started the conversation with, looking at the end result, can often skew that. Because if you think the end result is X and you end up at Y, it's that whole thing. I heard this story one time of a guy, he was working with an investor and he wanted to make like $5 million. And he got to 4.9 and he called the investor and he said, "You're a failure." Like, really? Now have 4.9 million or whatever it was. I'm making those numbers up, but you're not a failure. If you don't reach the ideal that you set that doesn't mean you don't have clarity. That just means that maybe life happened, or maybe you changed your perspective. Maybe that's no longer important to you anymore because you chased it. And once you got to, anyways, I'm rambling on. I want to give you the last word because I know we've covered a lot of things I wanted to hear about. What would you like to close and give everyone? And then, of course, before you sign off, to let everyone know where they can get you. Of course, we'll put it in the show notes. But I would, I always say people may not believe what I put in the show notes, or they may not read them. So let's hear it from you. But I'll give you the last word here, David.
I appreciate it. And thank you for that reflection. It's good to go back and forth. I would say the biggest thing is every day find clarity, every day make progress. And I promise if you pursue that every day find clarity, and that takes an initiative and courage to be curious about the things around you and every day make progress, those two things will intersect with each other in a way that brings you greater peace, greater purpose, and greater prosperity. It's on the journey of life. It's not sitting on life on the outskirts. So I have like the man in the arena quote literally around my house. Like I have like plaques of it, and it's like get in the game of life, and that's when you're gonna find clarity. And if you want to connect, I'm on all social media platforms, but I live on Instagram at the clarity guy underscore. If you want to go to my website is theclaritybrand.ai. So I would love to connect with whoever.
Awesome, awesome. And on your website, they can find your book, and I know it's on
Yes.
Amazon and all those other things. We'll put all those links, like I said, in the show. But David, thank you for two things. Thank you for coming on today and giving of your time, but also thank you for helping me grow as a person and probably gain more clarity about myself, not just the topic of clarity, but know a little bit better who Bobby Shelton is. And, that's the whole purpose of the Self Leadership Lab is, we experiment. We find things that maybe test us or challenge our beliefs or whatever. And you, my friend, you did a great job of that today for me. And I hope all the audience enjoyed it as well. So again, thank you for coming on and thank you for being you and being the clarity guy. That's a great title. I need to come up with a title for me. Maybe I can be the self-leadership guy. I don't know. That doesn't sound
Hey,
that great. But anyways, for all of you listening, I hope you enjoyed it. Go reach out to David if you have further questions. And until next time, lead yourself, find the clarity, put the systems in place. Figure out where you are in the cycle, decide where you want to go, but take the first step. As we started this conversation, we'll end it the same. You'll find clarity once you start moving. So start moving, get out of your thinking, start doing something. I wish you all the best. Until next time, God bless everyone. Have a wonderful week.